Folks, and welcome to the Adobe and Datacolor webinar for this evening. This evening we've got with myself, Richard West, we've got the lovely Richard Curtis from Adobe. Richard is going to be running through the start of the session. He's going to take you through some of the latest and greatest releases and information from Adobe, and then I'll be running through some of the equally recent and great information from Datacolor on some of their products as well. So without further ado, I think we'll pass over to Rich and say hello to you, Richard. You there?
Hi, Richard. Yeah, great to have everyone on board tonight.
I'll just swap over the screen to you, and we'll get you up and running.
Perfect. Thanks, Rich.
Cool. There you go.
Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. Rich, can you confirm that's the case?
I can't. Oh, yes, I can. Yes, there we go.
Perfect.
Yep,
Great.
all good.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Well, yeah, it's great to have you here tonight. And so my name is Richard Curtis. I look after all the imaging products here at Adobe in the UK. My kind of remit is Photoshop, Lightroom Mobile, the touch apps, Elements, Creative Cloud, workflows for photographers around Creative Cloud. I'm also a photographer, so I'm practicing all the time my photography and obviously using the tools as well. So out of today, what I really want to do is cover off very quickly what Creative Cloud is and what it means to everybody. Also, what's new in Lightroom 5. We're going to talk about Lightroom Mobile and hopefully show you that. I haven't tested it, so hopefully it should be fine. And then lastly, if we have time, to cover Photoshop for Creative Cloud and the Lightroom integration that we have inside the application for photographers. And I hear that a lot is, how does Lightroom and Photoshop work together? So we can cover that a bit later on. So firstly, just a quick intro for Creative Cloud, and I'm sure all you guys have seen Creative Cloud so far, and I'm sure a few of you have actually moved on to Creative Cloud, especially the photography bundle that we released late last year, which is excellent value, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But firstly, why did we move to Creative Cloud? Well, we see in the creative space that things are changing. The way people use the services on the internet are changing, the way people use their mobile phones and their tablets are changing, and the way people are interacting with those services has changed completely. And previously to Creative Cloud, there was that whole creative workflow was kind of very difficult to manage for our customers. They have the desktop applications, they're working with their applications as they always have done, but then to collaborate with somebody else or to send the asset to somebody else was really challenging. They had to create their own workflows and work streams up using things like Dropbox, which was never designed for the Adobe format, if you like the PSD and the TIFF format and this type of thing. So what we're seeing is a whole shift and change in the way that people want to work with technology and work with the applications. And we also saw that actually people want to be able to have the updates in the applications faster than the 18-month cycle that we used to have. And that's primarily because the client's expectations have changed, and what the client wants now is changing very quickly, either through word of mouth, through social networks, or this type of thing. So it could even be as simple as a wedding photographer going out there shooting, and the bride then asks him to do video as well, and previously he would be very challenged to do that. But now, when he has access to Creative Cloud and all the applications, he's able to download Premiere Pro and cut himself as well, or maybe farm it out and get somebody else to do the cutting as well. So it offers them a different way to support their client base. So really, the Creative Cloud gives us a way to, the next slide quickly, but Creative Cloud gives us a way to not only be able to connect the desktop applications and the online services together. So it's almost like a hybrid cloud where your desktop apps running on your local machine, but you have these services that you can use to move assets around. So a lot of innovation there. So really the Creative Cloud for us is a way to deliver the applications, but also deliver the online services in a way that will support the current demands of yourself in a connected world, but also your clients as well. But it's not really about the apps and all of that. You know, it enables us to also deliver our application updates very quickly. Moving to the subscription model means that we don't have to just update once every 18 months. We can actually update those applications as soon as they come out of engineering and quality control. So it means you get the updates much faster. And there's about 4 updates a year which are going to happen, especially around the Photoshop side and the digital imaging side of things. It's also not about just the new features that we put into the products as well, but it also has an impact on what we do and how we get a business. So for example, we wanted to introduce a community, a social community into people's work and be able to get people to share, be inspired and inspire other people to do that, because we think it's quite an important part of the creative process. So what Adobe did at the end of the year before last was acquire a company called Behance, and Behance was world leading platform for creatives to get their content out in the world. So we acquired Behance and then put the Behance into Creative Cloud and offered the Behance Pro site as part of the Creative Cloud subscription. That used to cost money to do that. Now as part of that Creative Cloud subscription, you get that as part of that ongoing payment. Behance has always been free, so if you're not part of Creative Cloud, want to have a look at Behance, then you can do by creating an account. You don't need Adobe ID to do that, but you get access to the Pro site if you want to publish a professional portfolio. We also purchased a company called Typekit, and Typekit has always been known for web fonts. Now, it's okay having web fonts. Web fonts are very important when it comes down to brand and your presence on the web, but it's also very important to have consistency across any medium, not just the web, but actually from a point of view of any business cards you're doing, any posters, any graphics, any kind of correspondence going out to the customer. It's ideal to have fonts that are available inside your desktop applications. So as part of Typekit, we work with Typekit to introduce desktop fonts, which are the same as the web fonts, and they're delivered through an application called the Creative Cloud app. And that Creative Cloud app enables you to synchronize fonts down to your desktop for using the creative applications, but also any applications that you have on your local computer, be that PowerPoint or Word or whatever that may be. And that's all controlled via the Creative Cloud app, and it's run out of that subscription. Again, it's also available for free members and to the photography plan as well. So if you're on the photography plan, you can also get access to Typekit. That was a complete change that happened last week. So this is a way that we're able to innovate and do different things to the Creative Cloud and add more values to our customers as we go through time. And there's loads of other things been happening on the Creative Cloud. A few months ago, we released another drop into the Photoshop world with perspective warp and also 3D printing. So we're able to drop big features like that whenever the market is ready for those features, and whenever the application is ready to be released, it will then be released into the market. So I want to just kind of get on to the demos very quickly, because I've got a lot to show, and I think it's more interesting than going through. So we're going to start off in Lightroom. And what I want to do before I go into all the new features and Lightroom Mobile is just to go over some things in Lightroom 4, because a lot of people haven't really seen the power of what Lightroom 4 delivered on an image. You can see here, hopefully you're all familiar with Lightroom, but if you're not, Lightroom is a very quick thumbnail outline of what Lightroom is. Lightroom is a way to organize your raw images in a very scalable way, which means you can put your images on external drives, have them referenced just in Lightroom as a catalog, and then being able to sort and manage and find your content very, very quickly, either by using keywords or by using metadata that came in from the camera. And then once you have that, you can then develop your pictures as you would in a darkroom. So everything's non-destructive. You can make changes very quickly, but you can't comp images together. So the difference between Lightroom and Photoshop is that Lightroom is really designed around image enhancement, and Photoshop is designed for designers, but also designed around image comp and pulling things together and getting images to look right as part of a larger composition. But let's just move this image. As you can see there, it's quite flat. But let's just move it into the development module, and you can see what I'm going to do with it. By looking at the histogram, you can see there that we've got a lot of highlight data is all blocked up and shadow data is blocked up. With the J key pressed, you can also see in the shadows I've got some shadow clipping over here. Now, we know there's lots of data in this picture, because we're not clipping the shadows, we're not clipping the highlights as much. Although it's a bit flat, we'd like to do something amazing to this image and make it really stand out and really show the beauty of the Eiffel Tower in this case. So for example, I can take the highlights and shadows slider. So in Lightroom 4, we split the slider into two. So we can now work on the highlights as its own entity and the shadows as its own entity, which gives us much more control over our image. So the highlight slider, I can move to the left, and you see what happens. You see what happens to the highlights. It really extracts those highlights out for me and recalculates the highlights based upon the RGB channels that you've actually got available to you. If I move the shadows, however, the shadows will pull all that shadow information out and really show all that data I have inside that shadow channel. And you can see there's a huge difference. And look at the histogram. All that data is now available to me in Lightroom for editing. I may want to change the exposure because it's a bit flat at the moment, and I can do that here. I can also set the black and the white point by moving the whites forward or backwards, whichever it needs to be, to find the clipping point. And as soon as I move that and I can see where it's clipping, Lightroom, if I hold the Alt key down, Lightroom will show me where it's clipping. And equally in the blacks, I can see where the blacks are starting to clip as well. So I get a good, precise view. I'm going to dial exposure down a little section there. I get a good, precise way of really making that picture come alive just by using 3 or 4 sliders in Lightroom. The last thing in Lightroom 4 that we fixed was the clarity slider. And the clarity slider really enhances midtone contrast. And now I can push the clarity slider all the way to the top and really put boost into those midtones. It really starts to make that image look really three-dimensional and really pull out all those textures and tones in that picture. So you can see there, just by using the basic panel, not even going into more sophisticated brushes and gradient filters that we have inside Lightroom now, I really start to get an amazing image out of Lightroom. So let's just go quickly into the other modules. And I want to cover Lightroom 5 quickly. So Lightroom 5 introduced something which really handy and actually helps you with that non-destructive process when you're editing, and that is the Clone Heal tool. Now the Clone Heal tool has always been round, and I can change the size of that just by using the bracket keys. That's great for things like this over here, which is just a piece of bracken. We introduced also on this tool the feather. I'm going to put the feather down for a second so you can see exactly what's going on here. And I'm just going to non-destructively take out this piece of bracken, and you can see there what it did. It actually replaced it with a different section of the image, and I can move that around and I can fill that in from somewhere else. If you look very carefully, you can see there's a very hard edge just down here, a very hard edge of that replacement. So I can use the feather attachment now and feather that into the scene. So now you can see, you can't really see the adjustment that I've made to the picture, and of course that's all non-destructive. The round was always okay, but the feather really enhances that so much more, and you can do so much more with it by blending in at this early stage inside the process, and actually use Lightroom as a very powerful desktop editing for your pictures, and then go into Photoshop at a much later stage to fix anything you want to there. Now the other element we did was something called the Advanced Healing Brush. Sometimes a round brush is a bit too big and loses too many pixels. Not loses too many pixels, but is too much of a surface area around the area I want to do. What I'd rather do is create a mask for whatever I'd like to remove. And I can do that now in Lightroom 5 by just painting on the image that I'd like to remove, and then by repositioning the mask to where it needs to, where the information needs to come from, and then I can blend that in also with the feather and blend that into the scene so you can't see it. So again, another great use of the cloning and healing tool used in Lightroom 5. Lightroom 5 we introduced a really cool tool that I use a lot now for buildings and for landscapes, which is the upright tool. I'm sure many of you have taken pictures like this. I certainly do, and I took some at the weekend, which is a little bit wonky. I don't always get the horizon right, you know, when I'm kind of trying to frame that picture up and I'm in a really odd position, it's quite hard to get it horizontal and get it right. So you can always bring that into Photoshop for fixing with something like adaptive wide angle in CS6 or with lens correction. However, move this into the development mode. we have the upright tool under lens correction, and that's under the basic tab. Now, all of you photographers out there, there's a really key part of this process. It's not dependent for the upright, but it's worthwhile having in place, and that is the enable profile corrections. Sometimes when you're taking a picture with your camera and your lens, the lens you're using may have a bit of aberchromatic correlation or a bit of vignetting on the edge of the lens. It may also have some barrel distortion, and most lenses have it. No matter how much you pay for a lens, you do get quite a bit. So what this does is it looks at the lens and the camera you're using and automatically remaps the image based upon the data we know about the vignette and any distortion mapping problems. So by clicking this, we'll automatically fix that picture, and you can see there it just repins that picture to where it needs to be. Now, that's not dependent upon the next feature, sorry, isn't dependent upon this function being enabled. However, it will help because now we've got complete correction of the image. The upright tool is built upon 6 or 5 components. One is completely off, one is auto, we've got level, vertical, and full. The level will just look at the levels in the picture and fix the levels for me, so just for the horizon. The verticals will look at any verticals in the frame and also the horizon and try and fix that, as you've seen just in this demo just now. If I reset that back to basics and go to auto, what auto will do is look at that picture, correct the horizontals, correct the verticals, and correct any barrel distortion that you may have in the fix, and it will do that for you as well. The other more exaggerated problem is when you have something like this, when you have the converging verticals, the horizons out, and the frame is twisted. So by using something like full will help me achieve the desired result much faster. So for example, if I press full now, it fixes it, but you see I've got a little bit of a perspective warp still happening on this column over here. So I can fix that very quickly by going to manual and just changing the transform and pulling that picture down. You see there how it's automatically cropping the image and managing the image for me, so I really don't have to do much work. The other feature we had in Lightroom 5, which I really like, is the Radial Filter. Now, I'm going to explain how the Radial Filter can be used through a couple of images. One is this one, and you can see here the story of the picture I want to preserve, and I want to tell the user about these, or the viewer about these cowboys that are walking across the plain. That's very hard to do with something like a post-crop vignette. Let's just put a post-crop vignette on, and you can see what happens. By placing a vignette under the effects panel, I place a vignette in the outer part of the picture. I don't touch the middle part of the picture because the vignette comes from the middle point outwards. So that's not really going to help my scene. I've still got the problem where I can see the cowboys, but the eye wanders into the bright spot just around here, and I want to get rid of that. I just reset the crop by double clicking on it, and then I want to use the radial filter. The radial filter is enabled exactly the same as the gradient filter, so I just draw on the image what I want to mask and protect. So I'm just drawing this on the frame now, and you can see there that it places the area around, or the radial filter around the cowboys. I can now go in, as I can with all my other filters, and just work on a very specific area, and you can see here how it's just dialing down the exposure to really focus my attention on the cowboys, not on the bright areas of the scene. I use this quite a lot. I use this a lot for faces. So for example, I may want to brighten this chap's face up so actually you see this when you come into the frame. So I'm just going to pull in the gradient filter over this chap's face, and I'm just going to raise the exposure. Now this is going the wrong way. I want to expose his face and not the paneling behind his head. So I'm going to invert the mask, and by inverting the mask I just pull in the exposure on the area that I would like to perform the work on. And you can see there that it does a pretty good job. I can then rotate this around and move this into position for where it needs to be to get it exactly in the right spot so it's not covering any other areas that I don't want to have. And this I find is a really great use of this tool just to focus your attention, on the viewer's attention on certain parts of the picture that you'd like them to focus on. And one feature there you can use, it's really quite nice, is the shadow recovery, to pull out any details of someone's face without affecting the whole scene. Let's go back to the Library module now. What you've seen here, and if you're a regular Lightroom user, you probably recognize these question marks. And these question marks are telling me that the pictures don't actually exist on this local computer. And that's because the pictures exist on an external drive somewhere. Now, I don't have that plugged in today, but what happens is if I turn the drive on, this will come into life and will start then to look at the images not on my computer, which they are now, and I'll talk about that in a second, but go to the actual drive. So the question is, what are they doing in the meantime? What are they looking at? Because that's too big for a thumbnail. So they're looking at something called a smart preview. And we built smart preview technology inside Lightroom 5 to really enable offline working. So now I can ingest my images into Lightroom, I can create a smart preview, I can unhook my external drive because I may have a lot of data on there that I can't have on my local machine. I then use the smart previews to preview the work in Lightroom. Now, unlike Lightroom 4, as you've seen just now, I've got everything inside the development module available to me, so I can work on all those pictures offline without having the main picture attached, which is great for traveling. What happens when you get back to the base or home or wherever you need to be, you can just plug the drive in and then you can press Command S. And as soon as the drive is recognized, Command S will automatically save any changes made in Lightroom on the desktop on that smart preview and update the version on the external drive. So it keeps all your metadata in check for where it needs to be. Now, as part of Lightroom 5.4 and the update a few weeks ago, we actually used the smart previews to do something else, and that was to enable Lightroom Mobile. So if I right-click on my identity plate, I'm just going to go in and look at my identity plate now, and you can see I have also there the show status and activity. If I go into identity plate, you can see that I have this show status and activity turned on. This will show me any activity I have with Lightroom Mobile. Lightroom Mobile is also available on the Preferences panel, and I have a tab now which is dedicated to Lightroom Mobile, which I can then sign in. You can sign in using Adobe ID. So if you have a photography plan, or any subscription plan for that matter, you automatically get Lightroom Mobile. And with Lightroom Mobile, you can sign in and you can start synchronizing across the wire onto your mobile device. Now the question might be, well, does that use my 20 gig of storage on the photography plan or with inside any subscription-based plan from Adobe? No, it doesn't. It's actually a separate piece of storage that you get as part of Lightroom Mobile, and you get an unlimited amount. We've tested about 60,000 images, and you're able to synchronize any content to your device. Now, the way I've been using this is work in progress. I may want to take some content and put it on my Lightroom, Lightroom on my iPad for picking or for doing some adjustments, and then doing that while I'm not at the desktop. And I'll show you how that works now. We wanted to make Lightroom Mobile and transferring files to a mobile device really, really super simple without having to really do anything complicated. And for that to happen, we utilized the collections. The collections are a way to organize your content and put data in here that you want to group together. When you enable Lightroom Mobile working and you enable a synchronization, Lightroom will automatically enable that synchronization for a collection. And on a collection itself, you will then have something called Synchronize to Lightroom Mobile. Sync to Lightroom Mobile will automatically start synchronizing my pictures in the collection to my Lightroom Mobile device, and also to Lightroom Mobile on a browser. So let's just turn this on now. I'm going to turn on my these 16 pictures as part of this edit and move across to Lightroom Mobile. So let me just minimize this for a second. And I'm just going to go into Chrome. And I'm just going to go into lightroommobile.adobe.com. Okay, so this will load up my collections. I have a login screen. I log in with my Adobe ID. It just so happened I've kept my login from the previous version when I logged in a few minutes ago. And you can see here I have a template thumbnail for my collection. And if I click on here, you'll see these pictures are now coming into Lightroom in a browser. Now, they're coming in quite nicely, and they will continue to come in. And as they're coming into here, they're automatically being made available to Lightroom on the iPad. So let's just go over there. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. So you should be able to see my screen. Hopefully you can. And Lightroom Mobile. So Lightroom Mobile, if I close that down a second, Lightroom Mobile looks like this. Lightroom. So it opens up, and you can see there that it's automatically started to synchronize the content from my Lightroom desktop via lightroom.adobe.com, via the Creative Cloud, into my iPad. So now I can see I have, let me just put my iPad up, you can see now I have my 16 photographs, the number I've picked and rejected and unflagged, and that comes in from the Lightroom on the desktop. If I double click on this, you can see it goes through different settings and different configurations. It'll also click on the screen, it'll show me those pictures. Now, this is showing me a preview of those pictures rather than the picture itself. So if I go into any picture, it takes a second or two to download the smart preview from the Creative Cloud into Lightroom Mobile for me to start working on it. But obviously I'd rather have it so that my pictures are offline, because then it means when I go out the house, I have my pictures with me and I can start working on them again, rather than having to have a connection. So when we talk about connections, it's worthwhile talking about the preferences. On the preferences, I have this option for sync over Wi-Fi only, which means that I'm going to protect any data plans that you may have running on your iPad. So you're not going to consume that data without Lightroom's permission. I've also got information about the shortcuts, and I also have information on the storage that I have left on my iPad. On the thumbnail itself, I have these three little dots. If I click on the three little dots, it enables me to do certain things. I can remove my collection from my iPad, or what I can do more appropriately is enable these pictures for offline editing. If I click the offline edit button, it will tell me that I need 24 megabytes. And remember, these files are about 30 meg a time, and there's 16 of them. So there should be about 350 meg. But actually what we're doing, because we're using the smart previews, is we're compressing the raw file down to a much smaller raw file that we're then moving across to the iPad. So that's why I'm using so much less space. And in fact, recently when I synchronized 2,600 photographs, and each photograph had a 50 meg raw file, I was able to use just over a gigabyte of data to store that on my local iPad. So it means it comes across those networks very, very quickly, and I have access to my data very, very quickly as well. So if I download that, you can see there it starts to download that content to my local machine. Now if I just click on here, I'm going to go into this picture here. We also have rotation, so I can actually apply rotation, and it automatically moves that into position for me. You can see there that now, because I have Smart Preview enabled and I have the document offline, I can now start working on that document when I'm offline. So for example, I have my histogram. I can turn that on and turn it off by just using my two-finger tap. I've got more information about the image as well by just double-clicking on the other side of the image. At the bottom, I have the thumb strip, or the film strip. I also have adjustments. I have presets, which are just come from Lightroom as static presets, so unfortunately not customized presets at the current time. And I have cropping, so I can crop my picture. Oops, sorry about that. So the idea here is once I'm in my picture, I can start working on it. But first of all, I might want to rank it. So I can actually use the little flag at the bottom of the screen to pick or unpick or reject it, same as in Lightroom, or I can actually use my my finger on the screen and use this for picking. While I'm doing that, any changes that I make to it will be suspended in the iPad and wait for me to commit those changes. If I go to my adjustments, at this point here, I can change the temperature and the white balance, but also the exposure. If I move the exposure to the left or the right, you can see there it moves the histogram in line with the picture. And I can also look at my highlights, shadows, and pull that information out. Then I can set the white point and the black point. Now the nice thing about the white point and the black point, as well as the highlights and shadows, is that I might want to see a mask of what I'm clipping. So by holding two fingers, I can now start to see a mask of where the image will clip. It's not clipping there, let's put a clipping in on the blacks. There you go. And you can see there that I'm getting precision, so I can hold that down for a second, it will refresh, and it will show me precisely where that's clipping. I can also, of course, zoom into the picture as well at quite a nice resolution and work quite locally. So you can see I can do that, and I can work quite locally at that area. I can also work on the clarity and vibrance and saturation. It may be that I want to put a color effect on here as well, maybe something like a cross process, and I can do that, and it makes a change for me. This is all non-destructive in Lightroom Mobile. I can also share this content out to others as well. So I can actually use the little arrow at the top to share, and I can move this to different collections, and I can also start a slideshow. So if I'm airplaying it to an Apple TV, I can also airplay that screen and that slideshow as well. Now you see at the top of the screen we've got this little icon. This is telling me any activity that's happened to the Creative Cloud. At the current time it's waiting for me to move to the next picture. If I move to the next picture, it will automatically start the synchronization for me, or I can force it to go. And the synchronization now will take any adjustments that I've made on my local iPad across through Lightroom on the desktop and into the Lightroom on the Creative Cloud. So if I just go to the Lightroom in the browser, just refresh that quickly, you should hopefully see the where is it? Just go back a second. Try to find that picture now. There it is. And you can see there that the actual adjustments have come through to Lightroom on the desktop. I can also use this for a bit of collaboration as well. I can actually go back to the sharing tab, and I can share this with the public by giving them a link, and I can also send it to Facebook and Twitter and Google Plus as well, so I can make it public. If I just go back to Lightroom very quickly on my desktop, you'll see that the actual adjustment has come through here into Lightroom on the desktop as well. And at any point in time, I can also go back and adjust this. So if I go back to the history, you can see here that I have the Lightroom Mobile settings. I can go back to the previous settings if I want to, or I can go forward in time. I can also make changes to this picture in the Basic tab here in Lightroom, or I can go into the Detail tab for anything to do with sharpening or the any effects like post-crop vignette. I can apply as post-crop vignette, and that will then synchronize that content back into Lightroom Mobile. So you can see there we've got this complete bi-directional synchronization that you don't have to do anything as a creative user. You can work on your pictures and have your content wherever you need to be, and it will manage that for you automatically. Just go back into Lightroom on the mobile again, show you one more thing. And obviously more and more people are using their iPads to take photographs, so you can also click on Lightroom to create you a new collection locally on this iPad. So you can say test DC for Datacolor and press OK. I'm at home at the moment, so I'm just going to do a couple of things. One is I want to enable auto import. That will automatically import from the camera roll when I've taken a picture. Turn that one on. And I'm also going to turn on and add a new entry from the camera roll itself. So I can do that, and it'll take me to the camera roll, and I can pick one of my pictures up that I had earlier. And now I'm just going to go to my camera and take a picture. There we go. So that picture should now come into Lightroom on the mobile device. I've got one photograph there already, so I can show you that working now. And you can see here that I have that picture from the camera roll. Now at which point I can then work on this picture. It's just preparing me now for this to work, because obviously it's a bigger file. And I can go into the crop then, for example, and I can then make a crop, and I can crop this to where it needs to be, and then I can go back. Now that will synchronize to Lightroom on the desktop as well. And you see here that this is a second really bad photograph I took just now. This is also available in Lightroom on my iPad. So what's happening there is that Lightroom is now transmitting this data back into Lightroom on the desktop via the Creative Cloud. So if I now go into Lightroom on my desktop, I should have in my Lightroom imported photographs, I should be able to see some pictures that are coming through. There's one of them, and there's the second one coming through, and you can see the adjustments that are being made. And also I have a Lightroom Mobile collection called Test EC. Remember, that's what we called it on the iPad, and I have those two pictures here as well, and I can work on those pictures. So I've got now complete transparency over any picture that I take on my iPad, but also have any adjustments that I make on my Lightroom on the iPad come through to the desktop and vice versa. So we've got a few minutes left just to cover a few elements off. And I wanted to cover the integration of Lightroom and Photoshop. So let's just pick up this image here. Just reset that image back to the basics. So you can see here this is a beautiful model, and I'm just going to use this. I'm going to do some work here in Lightroom, but also do some work in Photoshop. So I go to my development tab and make some adjustments. You know, the first thing I see here is that I need to work on the exposure because it's a bit flat. So let's push that up to about there. And we can work on the white point and the black point. So let's just hold the Alt key down and see where the whites start to clip. Well, they're clipping there, so I just want to clip there. And the black points start clipping here. I'm going to go negative on the clarity to soften her skin. And then what I want to do is go into Photoshop and apply some adjustments in Photoshop itself. So I can right click on the image. Now most people at this point would use Control E or Apple E on the Mac to edit in Photoshop, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that workflow. It's great. However, the problem is once you've done that, the render to the TIFF and the PSD file is actually done in Lightroom or in Camera Raw, and once you're in Photoshop, you can't go back into Lightroom. So if you want to make any adjustments to the raw file, you have to go redo it and then re-implement it in Photoshop, and that can be a bit of a workflow pain. To smooth that out, you can actually open it up in Photoshop as a smart object. What this will do is it will open up in Smart Object in Photoshop and wrap the Lightroom adjustments next to the physical raw file, so it keeps it non-destructive even while in Photoshop. Now for some reason I'm getting nothing on the screen, so let me just quit that again. I have some beta software running on my computer. It could be something to do with that, but we'll try again. And I have been installing and reinstalling software today, so it could be something to do with that. There you go. So you can see here that, let's maximize that. You can see here that we have the same image that came in from Lightroom, and we have this funny little icon on the screen now. And you can see there that this is the smart object representation. Now, obviously in Photoshop now we work in a layer-based system. So now I want to add a layer to this file. So say for example, let's take new adjustment layer. Let's do something around the color lookup. So let's make this look a bit more interesting by loading in a 3D LUT. I'm going to log in. I'm going to load in the Fuji Eterna 2250D and give this a look. And I quite like that. It's quite nice. But obviously I can turn the opacity down if I want to, or if I don't like it. I can change that look and make it a little bit more contrasty maybe, or completely different using something like a film stock 50, a really edgy, punchy look. So I can make my image look a little bit different. But it may be that the raw file conversion is actually affecting the way that the layer is being applied to the picture. By having the raw file preserved in Photoshop means I can go back and re-edit the picture and the raw details any point in time. If I double click on this object in the layer, it now opens that up into Camera Raw. So Camera Raw is the bridge between Lightroom and Photoshop, but it means that my edits are completely non-destructive between the two. So any adjustments on Lightroom that are made will come into Photoshop and will be made, and you can see in here into the panel. Now once I'm in the panel, I can then work on my picture. It may be that I want to just do something with the contrast over here. Maybe dial the contrast down a little bit, and I want to do something with the highlights and open the shadows up a little bit more, and I can make that adjustment. I can make the adjustment as many times as I want to do and press the OK button, and what happens then is that the adjustment layer of the color lookup will automatically be modified on top of the adjustments that are making the camera raw workflow. Okay, so it keeps the non-destructive element more non-destructive for a lot longer, and there's loads of things that we can do over and above that as well. So that's really kind of one thing I want to show you in Photoshop, and the integration between Lightroom and Photoshop, just in case you didn't know that. So almost coming to the end of my bit now. I'm just going to go back and cover a couple of things off in the presentation. So give me 1 second to switch over into presentation mode. So I just wanted to cover off the Photoshop Lightroom bundle. This is a photography-based bundle. It contains Lightroom and Photoshop, Lightroom Mobile, storage on the Creative Cloud, and a load of other things in there as well, including Typekit, Behance, and ProSite integration. So there's a lot of things in there, and that is really available for £8.78 a month, and it's a great deal. And you don't actually need to have any previous version of Photoshop or Lightroom to be on the plan. You can just basically log in, and you can go in, and you can just go in. And I've got a link on my blog, and I'll share that my blog with you in a second. You can go in and you can subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. If you want to try it, you can do. Just navigate to the Creative Cloud page, the plan page, and you can then try those applications out. While we are on that, you can then there's some online content that you can have a look at. Everything I've shown you today is all documented, and you can look at the videos that we have from Adobe from a corporate perspective on tv.adobe.com. There's some great stuff there by Julian Cost and Russell Brown and all the other guys who work in the business unit. And then obviously my blog is at blogs.adobe.com/Richard Curtis. I write on a Friday, and I write about things creative to do with photography and imaging. It could be anything from in camera, Lightroom, Photoshop, Photoshop 3D, Camera Raw, loads of stuff. I'm not sure I'm going to write for Friday this time, but I'm sure I'll pull something out the bag for them. You can also follow me on Twitter as well at Richard Curtis, and that's a way to keep updated with what we're doing. There's quite a lot of things that we're working on. We have an event coming up in July called Photoshop Live in Brighton, and we'll be showing a whole load of stuff, how to use Photoshop in many different ways, from a design point of view and from a photography point of view. So there's lots of things going on. So if you want some more information, follow me or look at my blog, and I'll keep you updated as and when we go on. So out of that, thanks very much for listening to me. I'm going to hand you over now to Richard, who's going to finish his bit off.
Cool, thanks Rich, that's great, thank you mate, and some new and exciting stuff there, so good to see. It's lovely to see what's happening basically with the joys of the mobile, Lightroom Mobile there. It's really cool, isn't it? So I suppose the key thing to bear in mind with this is every time I look around, I think we've got to the limits of what we can do with technology, and yet we keep on sort of going that little bit further and ending up with some new ways in which we can actually see our images in different places. And of course that brings us back every time to color, because if you're doing something professionally, or if you're wanting to be working on your images and sharing them, perhaps not professionally in as much as making money, but in a controlled environment, then having a means of establishing what color should be shown accurately and then controlling that across all devices becomes more and more paramount. And with Behance coming out, the fact that you can actually, or the integration with Behance into the Creative Cloud, and the fact that you can share these images and start working collaboratively across design groups and within photography magazines and so on, it's fantastic that you can actually do this. It's superb. It's saving so much money in terms of just distribution costs and movement of teams and so on. But you do need to control that color, and so therefore that brings us into some of the ways in which the Datacolor solutions tie in with Adobe's solutions. So one of those first ones to look at, we're going to be very brief on some of these now, is something that for those of you within outdoor or location photography or wedding photography, as is the case here, will be familiar with, and that's the issue of taking lots of photographs of the same subjects and having those subjects in different lighting conditions, and thereby finding out that okay, because of the different lighting conditions, your colors on your subjects, which you know are the same, look different. People look perhaps slightly too red, too warm in one lighting condition, maybe too cold in another lighting condition. So we want to get to this situation where we can even that out and basically control that color environment. Now, this is a part of your workflow, and we'll cover off the rest of the workflow that a lot of us work within. But the solution to this particular problem is it comes in the form of a color chart that you can aim for, something you can use and essentially establish what those colors are as a known set of colors. People have used over the years things like gray cards, where you've at least got a perhaps selection of 4 different grays, or white, black, and gray, which you can actually use to set white and gray points and black points within your images. But that's really only setting the contrast, whereas if you've got a color chart, like what we've got here in the Spider Checker, this gives you a whole range of colors, 48 different colors basically, in order for you to actually shoot and know what those colors are, because we can tell you what those colors are exactly on the chart. They're measured, they're known, and then you can see what they're reading within, for instance, Lightroom, or for instance within Photoshop, or within Camera Raw within Photoshop. Let's quickly show you this within Lightroom. Let's just pop out of here. So this is some of my travels now. Some of the trips around. I think this was Barbados last year, basically, where I was shooting around some of the markets and so on. And, it's hell. Richard goes to India and very nice tracks in the hillside. I go to the beach. Not quite the same, but hey, I'll stick with my option on that one. Actually, in this case, I'm sure his was fantastic. But the key thing here is you need to shoot the Spider Checker, your color chart, in every lighting condition you're shooting in, if you want to have those same colors true all the way through that workflow. So basically, here I've shot the same color chart and cropped them down into each of the lighting conditions. Important to say, actually, with the Spider Checker, it's quite a hefty device, not weight-wise, very light, but it's about the same size as an iPad or a tablet computer. And that's very intentional, because we need you to have something that is big enough to actually shoot from a distance, because perhaps if you're doing group scenes or perhaps even landscape photography, you need to be able to get that into the scene and still be able to see it, not just have 1 pixel per color, because you are going to crop it in. So here we've cropped this image in, and then what we're going to do is we're going to actually use this to first of all set the gray point. So kind of like using a gray card, we're going to use this gray square here and set our gray point with that particular gray card. We're then going to use our little color picker here to just check using the histogram on the right hand side here. You see underneath the histogram when I roll over the image that these numbers appear here, and so we're looking for 96% grey here, or 96% white, depending on which way you want to look at it. And down here we need something like a 4% black, and it is. If it weren't, in fact, the black's just a little bit too light, so we'll just drop that black slider down a bit, so that get it away. So we'll just increase the blacks in there just a little bit. But basically, once we've got those to somewhere around the 4% mark, then basically we've got the right sort of tonality, the right contrast setting for our images. At that point, we've got a handy little plugin that sits in Lightroom or sits in Camera Raw within Photoshop, and it allows us to open up this image in Spider Checker. So here I'm going to open that up from Lightroom in the Spider Checker app, and it's just going to look for any updates. I'm going to cancel that because I don't want to waste time looking for any updates at the moment. Well, what we've got here is that same shot in the background here, and overlaying on that, I'm just moving around a selection of colors. Now, these are the known colors. So basically, the software knows exactly what each of those color swatches needs to be. And what we're doing here is we're just laying that on there. We can then save that into Lightroom or Camera Raw, give it a bias if we want. So if we are shooting more portraiture, we can give that a portraiture bias. If we're shooting more saturated colors, perhaps for maybe pack photography, that sort of thing, then we could give it a saturated bias. I'm going to choose colorimetric, effectively a neutral bias to our images here. Key thing with this, set the same bias for each of those shots of the Spider Checker in each of those lighting conditions, because you need to compare like for like. So I'm going to hit this save calibration. I'm going to give it a name. We're going to call it Cardiff, because that's where I am at the moment. Slightly ironic, but basically, if I click on OK here, that's now quit out of the app. what we should see down here, if the gods are with us, would be the words Cardiff appearing here. But of course, one of the nuances of Lightroom is we just need to quit Lightroom and restart it in order to get any external presets uploaded in there. So we're just going to open up Lightroom again there, just bounce that open, and you'll see that little very small it is preset metadata come into the there we are, Cardiff, it's popped in there. So another update. I haven't done my update yet. Then again, I haven't got my my copy of Lightroom Mobile on my iPad yet. So we're going to be doing that later on tonight. But anyway, there's the Cardiff version of the preset. So we've now essentially created a correct preset for that lighting condition. And as we scroll down here, probably unlikely at home or wherever you are watching this from that you'll see any major differences. But perhaps up in the little thumbnail here, you may on some of these see just some that's slightly lighter shades in the blues, for instance, in the portraiture side of things there. You can see perhaps some changes there. If I just apply one of those onto the, you see perhaps the change in the histogram on the right hand side actually. So if I show you that, you can see how those colors are being affected by the different types of color calibration. So effectively what we're doing is we're setting up the correct color curve to produce the correct colors from those shots. And so therefore, as soon as we've done that, anything that's shot in that particular lighting condition, so I know which particular lighting condition this was shot in, if I then go into there and I say, okay, I now have you know, these shots here were set in that particular lighting condition, I'm going to set that Cardiff lighting condition there. You can see it's just taking out some of the shine out of that red in the rather faded sun umbrella there. I mean, perhaps if I put on a more saturated one, you'll see a subtle difference there. Yeah, you see the reds and the yellows boosting there. But you can see how much difference, hopefully, at home, if you calibrate it on your screens at home, how much difference that can make. If you can't, well, perhaps that's because we need to do some of the other parts of our workflow. So this is one of our tools that we've got here within the range of the Datacolor software for allowing you to control your colors and work in conjunction with Lightroom and with Photoshop. Now, as we said, that there's also other tools in there, things like the Spider Cube, for instance. This is one of those three-dimensional grey cards that Datacolor produce. And again, you can see it here. This is actually a Camera Raw's, one of Camera Raw's windows here. You can see it working in there. Essentially, this allows you to set black and white points in here. Unfortunately, not going to have enough time to talk about that tonight, but come back to one of our other webinars later on in the month. I've got, for instance, an interesting one coming up with reportage photographer Edmund Terakokin later on in the month, so please come along to that, and we'll see if we can drop some details of this and how to use it into the webinar then. But effectively, we've got this range of different solutions that work with Photoshop and Lightroom. And don't forget, just to give Richard a little bit of a helping plug here, we've got that fantastic bundle on the Creative Cloud at the moment for the photographers bundle. So go along to the Adobe site and find out more about that. But as I said, this part of your workflow, of course, what we've got here is just, as far as this little diagram shows us, is the first two steps covered, i.e. how to shoot in camera and capture the correct colors. We've then got, as we move down here, the steps 3 through 5 are actually supposed to be the same screen, your computer screen, but it's a timeline. Because what we've got there is a cast that's being, you know, because your screen is aging, has got a cast to it, has got some sort of tint to it. You're seeing that image that was taken, it was a very neutral image, as you can see on the back of the camera viewfinder there, but it's appearing green when it gets onto your screen on your computer. Natural instinct is obviously to say, that's not how I saw it, and take those green colors out, that green tint. And when you do that, you get to that step 5 there, and start moving into the print section or the output section of your workflow. Now that could be to an external printer, it could be to your printer, it could be to a website, to Behance, for instance, and pop it up into that collaborative working environment. But basically when you do that, because if what you've done between steps 3 and 5 is go in there, use Photoshop or Lightroom to remove that cast, you've actually ruined what was a perfectly good image because you've not been able to see the correct colors on your screen. So therefore, what we need to do is take that into account, find some means of solving that. And we also need to think about, okay, if we get to that stage 6, if we now print it out, if our printer or our output is perfectly calibrated, if we're using a superb external printers that actually does a great job. People like G.F. Smith or Vanilla. These are people who have got fantastic color managed workflows and really worthwhile working with. But if you're using somewhere or somebody that hasn't got that, you can also get some coloration getting in there, some incorrect colors basically, because there may be an incompatibility of calibration between the computer you're printing from and the printer itself, down to different things like different stocks and papers and so on. So lots of things you need to be able to take into account here. Now we have solutions for all ends. Now that print end of things, we've got something called the Spider print, one of our specifically made devices for that print end of things at Datacolor. Now don't forget, Datacolor specifically make devices for color management. But that's the way the company is geared. But this is our print end device, and really intended for those design studios and photographers to use to make sure that the printer they're using is printing out correctly. But it can be used at the high end as well. We've also considered the other end of things. We've not just had a look at the print end, we've also got the front end covered, and that's with the Spider checker. However, in order to cover the most important part of our workflow, stage 3 through 5, we've got to consider how we can actually control this scenario, the displays. And of course, nowadays, displays come in all sorts of forms. I mean, Richard showed you just in his section the fact that he had his computer there, but he also had his iPad working in conjunction with his workflow there. He's showing stuff on that. He's evidently got a laptop. And of course, I know Richard and myself work in the video marketplace as well, so therefore we also work in a scenario where what we're producing, maybe capturing in DSLR format, is something that's going to be shown on TV screens or in a broadcast studio on video playback monitors. So we need to be able to take into account that video playback end as well. And certainly for anybody who's working in the realms of professional photography nowadays, covering both aspects is becoming more and more paramount. You need to get colors correct on all the way through. There's no point getting perfect colors in a design piece on your photography and then having a corporate video running alongside it that has no bearing to it whatsoever. It just makes you look unprofessional, makes a lousy product. So we need to be able to control that color management. And of course, the way we can do this is with our good old friend, the Datacolor Spider. Now, we've now got this working in multiple different devices. It can handle everything, even projectors and so on can be calibrated using the device. The way it works very simply is to have, very similar to the way that the Spider checker works, a range of known colors with the software that comes with the device. And as you saw there, it's hanging against the screen. Basically, you plug it into the USB port of the computer, for instance, if you're working on a computer that's running to a screen, a computer screen, and then you can run the software and it will run the color swatches in front of it. But of course, the same device can be used for any form of transmissive color. So be that on your tablet or your phone for starting to get into calibration there, or also in that studio or broadcast environment. But for that, we need to work in a slightly different fashion. And that's why Datacolor, they've now introduced the Spider HD. It's a new bundle aimed purely at well, not purely actually, aimed at covering the video marketplace as well. So actually will work within the photographic environment, but it'll absolutely work for calibrating your video displays, your video screens, your playback. So when you're playing back stuff that you've perhaps burnt for customers on DVDs and so on, then great, you can now actually make sure the colors are correct as far as that playback is concerned as well. When you're working on your color grading, for instance, if you get into that. So therefore, the solution comes with a Spider Elite and a Spider Cube and a Spider Checker. So everything I've told you about this evening is included in the solution. As you can see, there's some sort of guide, street pricing there for dollars and euros. You can make your own equivalent pricing for pounds, I'm sure. You can figure out what the exchange rate is. But it comes with a whole range of new, latest cutting-edge software from Datacolor, which allows you to calibrate, as I say, not just displays that are connected to computers, but also stuff that's running purely off playback devices like DVD players, Blu-rays, etc., etc. So, I have to say, tonight I'm not going to get a chance to show you it, but we're going to do a specific set of webinars around the video marketplace. I've got one coming up in June, June 10th. I'm going to be running with one of our videographer friends and affiliates here, and we're going to be showing you how he's working that into his workflow, and we'll be giving you different webinars to keep you up to speed on the video side of things and give you some tips and tricks on that. Key thing you're going to get out the back end of it is this delightful means of actually controlling your colors, even if it's on a screen that you're not actually driving from a computer, i.e. you're driving it from a DVD player. So you get a set of guides, you pop into your DVD players, your Blu-ray players, your driving devices, and basically get an opportunity to create that. But as I say, we're covering off that in more detail. If you can't wait, please go to the website, go to spider.datacolor.com, no HTTP in there, and you can choose, for instance, /EN for the English version of that, but gives you a whole bunch of information about the new Spider HD bundle there. Important to mention to you folks that tonight, because you've been very kind in coming along to the webinar, we really appreciate your time. Therefore, we've got some special pricing to make you aware of. Now, we've been able to extend our bundle price, or the promo price rather, on the Spider 4 Express. Now, this is our entry-level version of a Spider, but it's coming in at 79 euros, so somewhere around £68, I think, last time I checked the conversion rate. So if you do want to take advantage of that, please pop along to one of your local resellers or come online to us at our store. In fact, you can come to our online store. Orders there are in euros, so pricing is in euros basically. So depending on well, unless you're hitting the US store, and you'll see US pricing. But in Europe, even if you're coming from the UK, you'll see euro pricing there. But you can place orders there. But just as an extra special thank you for attending tonight's session, seeing some great stuff from Richard and some lovely stuff from ourselves. I hope you'll agree. Basically, we're offering a 20% discount on the range of different Spider products on the spider.datacolor.com store for those who've attended the webinar tonight. So we'll be sending you out a thank you email, and that will have the code relevant to plug into our web store. But you do need to get it, and it's only applicable to the datacolor.com/orders web store there. So we'll be sending that out to you in due course tomorrow. I have to say 20% is on standard SRPs, not on special discounted prices already. So that's it from us. I'm just going to wrap up with pointing out to you, if you need to find out more, a fantastic resource we have written by one of our knowledgeable bods inside is our ebook, which is in multiple different languages, but there's the English version there. So if you want to pop in and draw down our ebook, then you can get that from the Datacolor website. If you need to find out more, there's a whole bunch of videos and cartoons on our YouTube channel, so please go along there and find out more about any of our products. We've managed to scratch the surface of a few of them tonight, but we can give you more details on a lot of them there. Or if you have any burning questions that we don't answer in the questions and answers section coming up very shortly, then please drop in a line to that free ticket support line on our website, or go to the free phone line, and I gather it is 00 at the start of that from the UK, just to give that European a free phone number. So I'll remind you one last time before we hand over to yourselves to ask any questions you've got, that we've been doing this tonight with Richard, and we very much appreciate his well, shining presentation this evening, which showed us a whole bunch of new stuff there, and really can't wait to get my hands on the mobile version of Lightroom there. So really going to be looking forward to that. And of course, they've got a great photographers bundle on Creative Cloud there to remind you of at the moment. I'm going to say thank you at this point from the presentation side of things, and we will then open it up to you guys to ask us any questions through the question chat window that you may have. So thank you for your time, folks. Let's pop into our presentation window and have a look at some of the questions you may have. Ooh, blimey. So we're kicking off with a could you elaborate? Rich, this is one for you if you're still there. Are you with us still? Mr.
Yeah,
Curtis.
I am. I'm here. Any questions?
I can see the questions here. I hope you don't hear an echo.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate a little more on the switching from Lightroom to Photoshop and how the files are retrieved in Lightroom?
Yeah, so basically when you open the file from Lightroom to Photoshop, it opens it in Photoshop as a PSD, and then obviously embeds it inside the PSD as a layer as a smart object. And inside that layer, you have the original raw file, and you have the embedded metadata changes that are made inside Lightroom. Now, obviously, you can also to add on to that, you can't, once you've gone into Photoshop, obviously you can't re-edit the core data back in Lightroom, but what you can do is, obviously, because you're in Photoshop, at any point in time you have the file embedded into the Photoshop file, so you can re-edit it once you save the PSD, but you can also have a PSD in Lightroom as well, so you can actually have it as part of your organizer and Lightroom module. So you can go back and re-edit it even after you've closed Photoshop down, if you've imported it as a smart object. Hope that helps.
Okay. Next question is, thanks, Richard. I'm on the photography plan, but not using Lightroom Mobile yet, as I am an Android user. And sorry when I pronounce something wrong here. Is Lightroom Mobile going to be made available for Android at some point in the future?
That's a great question, and yes, it is on our roadmap. We have another release coming shortly for the iPhone, but the Android is definitely on our roadmap. It's definitely something we're going to take a look at. So keep your eyes peeled. I'm not sure exactly when that will be the case, but as soon as we have any information to share, I will then post that on my blog.
Okay, so that's it. No further questions.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your time today.
Cool, yeah, we seem to have wrapped up, don't we? So if there's no other questions, folks, that's a great pleasure having Richard and Oliver on with us this evening. We'll be back, as I say, later on in this month. I think it's on the 19th, I think, they've been Terracovian, but please check out the rest of the webinar details on the Datacolor site. If you've got any further questions, please drop them through to the support lines as discussed. But with that, I think we'll say thank you very much to Oliver and thank you very much to Richard for their help and presentation and knowledge this evening. And we'll look forward to seeing you all again very shortly.
Thank you very much and bye.